Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is an exclusive members only event, and we're excited to have you with us here this evening. Before we dive into our conversation with Mayor Adena Ishii, I want to share some important information about an ongoing election you should have received a couple emails about. Just keep in mind that everything I say now will be repeated in an email. So if you don't catch all of it, it'll be repeated in an email. The Berkeley Democratic Club sent out notices about registering for online voting in the ADEMS election. And to learn more, you can go to the ADEMS elections website. And on that site, you'll find candidate statements for Assembly District 14. This is to help influence and shape the California Democratic Party. Our 12-member board has cast their ballots and endorsed the Democrats for Progress and Justice slate. And while the board does not vote on entire slates, but rather individual candidates, this is the result of our vote. However, please note that this is just a recommendation, and the actual endorsement, the official Berkeley Democratic Club endorsement, will be determined by your vote, the members. So it's important to cast your ballot. So we'll be sending an email this week with a ballot for you to vote for ADEM candidates. Once again, this information, along with your online Berkeley Democratic Club ballot, will be sent to you via email. But most importantly is to vote in the actual ADEMS election itself. Now more than ever, it's important for us to unify in the face of the Trump administration and work together. And so with that, I think that concludes all the business we need to take care of. I'd like to welcome Mayor Adena Ishii. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. And I see so many friends on the attendee list here too. So hi everyone.
Well, it's nice to have you, and I'm sure you'll see more people trickling in. So just to give you sort of the outline, we had the board members come up with some questions, and we had some questions also emailed to us as well. And so we'll try to get through that. And then if people have questions in the audience, if we get through all that or want to ask you, I don't know, about your favorite hobbies, where we can entertain that. But I know you have a hard stop at 8 o'clock, so we'll be mindful of the time. Okay, so for our members who may not be as familiar with you, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about how your first couple of months have been and what's been a highlight and what have you learned so far? But mainly just, help our members get to know you a little bit more now that you're our mayor.
Yeah. Well, hi everyone. Good evening. It's 6:30. So you're reaching me at the end of a 10-hour day. I am originally from Southern California, a small town north of LA called Agora Hills, but I've been up in Berkeley for about 16 years now. I am a proud alum of Berkeley City College and UC Berkeley. I came up here as a Berkeley City College student. That's really when I got involved in politics. I was helping organize my peers on budget cut rallies up in Sacramento, really trying to make sure that we had enough funding for education. And that's what got me into politics. I joined the League of Women Voters, the Berkeley Albany Emeryville League, which I'm sure many or all of you are familiar with, and ended up becoming our youngest and first woman of color elected president in 107 years. So I feel like it's very fitting because I'm our 23rd mayor and also our first woman of color mayor and also our first API mayor as well, which is something that I'm feeling especially proud of, having just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Asian Health Center. Let's see, what else do you want to know about me? I live in South Berkeley with my family. Because this is supposed to be like an evening with me, I also want to kind of share just some things about my personal life because I think folks are kind of curious about that. I have 3 dogs. They're all named after Japanese baseball players. So that's Ichiro, Matsui, and Shohei. My daughter is a junior at UC Berkeley. She's studying ethnic studies and sociology. And my husband and I have been in this house. We actually moved in basically at the same time as I started running for mayor, which is a little bit crazy because it means that I was trying to move into a house and also run a campaign at the same time. So you asked me also about my first couple of months. For those of you that don't know, I got sworn in on December 6th. My first meeting was December 10th, and then we immediately went on break until January 20th. And that didn't mean that I wasn't busy. I was actually taking meetings the entire time, but I wasn't allowed in my office because they were doing lead remediation until January 6th. So I wasn't actually able to get into my office physically until January 6th. And we've been really spending the first like official month um, with just setting everything up. I think a lot of folks don't realize they're like, oh, you're the mayor, so you just come in and things happen, right? And yes, that's partially true. And also, it's just like any other job. So I had to get onto my email. I got my work phone for the first time. I finally got my work laptop just last week. I was able to attend the US Conference of Mayors. So that was really exciting. Um, I want to say that I was just really proud to be able to represent our city in this space. I walked in on the first day, and just as you might expect, unfortunately, when I went to sign in, they couldn't find my registration because they didn't realize I was a mayor because they thought, oh, she's too young, or I'm just not what they expected, basically. And so I remember in that first day, this is the month of January, I walked in kind of feeling like, oh, you know, do I fit in here? Do I belong? In my family, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome. But I think one of the best things about going to the US Conference of Mayors was walking out of there feeling like, oh, yeah, I totally belong here. And I was able to make so many great connections and learn from a lot of my fellow mayors around the country. And what was very exciting to me is that they were very focused on the issues and not about partisan drama, which I think is super important for this time. I know a lot of folks are feeling really unsure and scared. And I think it's such an important part of my job to really show our city that we're going to be standing up for our values, that we're going to be protecting our people, that we're focused on providing all the services that we can to folks. And we know that things are going to come up with the presidential administration, and we need to be able to, of course, be prepared as much as possible. But also, we're going to just have to roll with the punches a little bit and be flexible and know that nothing is going to be fully perfect in this next 4 years. I suppose that's an understatement. Um, Other things that we've done in the first couple of months, I'm really proud to be a co-sponsor on our Sanctuary City reaffirmation. Council member Brent Blackaby put forth an item to reaffirm our sanctuary city status, and I'm really proud of our council for doing that unanimously. It was such a moment of pride to really be seeing all of these folks from different parts of our city come together to reaffirm our sanctuary city status. And I've been working very closely with our city manager to make sure that that we're all on the same page, that all of our city departments know, what our policy is around not working with ICE. We're also forming a mayor's task force, and that's very exciting as well. So, if you're interested in getting involved in that, please do let our office know. I just think there are so many opportunities to make sure we're getting out information to the public, and this is one of them. We want to make sure that there's consistent information because things can be really confusing, and there can be reports that are incorrect or false reports of ICE coming in. We want to make sure that we are, communicating very clearly across the board and also sharing resources. There's so much that's available out there. And one of the things about this administration, although obviously they're creating so many challenges and making people feel very scared, there are some very real threats there. It's given me and hopefully all of you an opportunity to see how our community can come together. And I'm really proud of that work as well. I think there are so many people who have come up to me and said, like, hey, how can I help out? If not with sanctuary cities, I'm really passionate about this other issue. What can I do? And that's something I'm excited to talk to you all about tonight. So that was a lot, but I just
No,
wanted to
I appreciate
share
it.
all that.
And it dovetails nicely into a question that the board had, and that was and you touched on it a little bit about giving the shifting political landscape, um, and looking at this administration's stance on sanctuary cities, how do you see Berkeley navigating its role as a sanctuary city under the current federal government? And you had mentioned you are part of a mayor's task force. We're curious about that sort of collaboration and steps that you're taking to work with other local governments, state officials, or federal agencies on these critical regional issues, including funding. So if you could just talk to us a little bit more about that mayor's task force or what those conversations have looked like, I'm sure people would find that fascinating.
Yeah, so for the mayor's task force, it's not actually a task force of many mayors. It's the task force that I've created for people and organizations throughout our city. So
Okay.
these, yeah. So this is kind of we've invited some folks, and actually that email is getting sent today. So if you're someone who expected to be on that list, you should receive something today. Um, but we are inviting different people and groups who do work around immigration, whose populations are impacted, to be involved. So, like I said, we could share resources and information. Although I'm really glad you brought up the mayor's connection as well, because I attended the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but I also attended a conference that was actually a training by California League of Cities in Sacramento. And interacting with other mayors around the state, around the Bay Area, around the country is very helpful in making sure that we're, again, on the same page with the information. I was able to hear about different ICE rates that happened in other communities that maybe hadn't been reported in the local papers yet, or on national papers, because they are such small towns. And it is really helpful to understand, how did it look in the city? What were the city employees faced with? And, how can we prepare as a city as well? And I just want to give like our city staff so much credit, because they have already done a lot of work from the last time. For folks that don't know, even though we are reaffirming our sanctuary city status, we've actually been a sanctuary city for way longer. We were the first sanctuary city in the country. So this is kind of, I feel like, something we can be really proud of as Berkeleyans. And then in terms of the funding, and how we kind of just generally deal with the Trump administration, um, you know, like I said, there are a lot of promises that their administration is making right now. And some of them are not legal, some of them are not possible. Some of them are very complicated to do, that there's a lot of bureaucracy and checks and balances in place. So this is not to say like, oh, we're not taking it seriously, but this is to say that we are keeping a very close eye on what's happening, preparing, what they say, it's like prepare for the worst, hope for the best. We're definitely kind of coming in with that landscape. And I will say also, again, here is where our city manager has gone through and looked at, where are we getting our funding from on the federal level? Who is that going to impact? Like which departments will it impact? And also, subsequently, which people will be impacted by this. A lot of cities around the country are taking a look now to say, like, how can we be more sustainable? How can we try to look outside of federal funding? What grants that we have will be impacted? It definitely is. It is, a concern for us. And again, I just want to reiterate, that our council is really united in making sure that we're providing resources for people, and especially the folks that are most vulnerable in our communities. I think that this Trump administration causing chaos and fear, it's really infuriating, because we are already struggling still from the impacts of the pandemic and trying to rebuild. We're working very hard to make sure that we are financially sustainable, that there are all these projects that we want to do here as a city. And this definitely throws a wrench in things. It makes things much more challenging. And something that I see as my goal is to be still focused on moving the ball forward, because I don't want us to fall behind just because he keeps throwing things our way. Another thing I want to mention is that I've heard that elected officials for sanctuary cities, so myself, that I will be prosecuted by the Trump administration. And that is another thing that I find, absolutely ridiculous, that they are going to create a department to specifically focus on prosecuting our elected officials. When again, we are trying to do our jobs and provide services for our people and protect people in our community. So, as a leader, I really wear this as a badge of honor to say that the Trump administration is trying to sue me for doing something that I think is so clearly the right thing to do. And I'm very proud to be in this position. I think the other thing I will also say, though, is that I think it's important that we're not putting ourselves out there unnecessarily. And by that, I mean, I'm not going to be on social media trying to taunt Trump or, trying to get his base riled up. I'm not about doing that. I really am focused on making sure that our city is protected and that we keep doing the great work that we're trying to do here in our city.
Thank you. The conversation is already sort of mirroring the conversations I'm having with our friends. We'll say, "How are you doing? How are you doing?" And then it will, we'll start to talk about Trump and get sort of caught up in that. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing. And now I'm going to sort of dovetail to another question that we had, and that is about your, let's dive into your vision for Berkeley, both in terms of the short term, say for this year, and then the long term of the city. Where do you see us heading, and what do you hope to achieve in both timeframes?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm always excited to talk about that. My priority issues are the same priority issues that I've been talking about for 2 years now, basically, which is housing and homelessness, public safety, and infrastructure. I think that in terms of what I think we're going to be able to get done, I think it depends a lot on what does end up happening with the Trump administration in terms of funding, in terms of like how that impacts our resources. But I think that there are some very clear projects that we are really, interested in focusing on. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But the other thing I want to say here that I think is important is that those are my three priority issues, or housing and homelessness, I guess you could say that's two. So four priority issues. Um, but there are some things that I think need to go along with that. And these are also things that I've been talking about for the last couple of years. One of them is to rebuild and build the relationships and trust between the city council members. We have 5 new people from the last year. And that's 2 city council members that were elected in special elections, and then the 3 of us who were elected in November. That in itself means that we've got a lot of new faces. And when I was very involved in the Public Service Center at UC Berkeley, they taught us this model that I think is really helpful. It's called forming, storming, norming, performing. And it's this idea that anytime a group comes together, there's going to be this sort of forming period. And then there's going to be a storming period where they're kind of figuring each other out. How do we work together? Do I trust this person? How do I know them? And then a norming period, like, okay, we've moved past that. We kind of know each other. We trust each other now. Performing, which is like, okay, we're like a well-oiled machine. And I share that because this is really something that I try to bring with me to different spaces that I'm in. This is how I kind of view leadership. It's important to be able to kind of trust the process and know it's going to take a little while for folks to get settled in, and that's okay. It's normal. It happens anytime any kind of group forms. So that's one thing. So building council relationships, rebuilding council relationships and trust. Also rebuilding relationships with the community. This is part of it for me. Like, I want to be out there talking to the public. What are we doing? How can I be transparent? How can I answer questions? How do I make sure that our office is available? This is something that is super important to me. I think having worked with the League of Women Voters for such a long time, transparent government and accountability in government is something that we talk about often, and it's a value that I have and I hold very strongly. The third thing that I would say is kind of in support of my priority issues is making sure that we are increasing our revenue and that we have a balanced budget. There are some concerns, we will be in a budget deficit, and I want to make sure that that's really clear to people. Again, being like transparent about what's going on. There will be some changes that we are going to have to make. And how do we make those changes with the least amount of impact on the services that we want to provide, the projects that we want to do as a city? That is something that we are working on. And then just circling back, because I know folks, this is a very policy, focused group. I'm looking to see who's on the chat. Many of you are on here. So folks that I've already been having conversations with. So there are so many different projects. Like for instance, Measure FF just passed. Okay, how do we make sure that we're moving things forward? That is not only that we're getting in the funding, but that we have the projects, that everything's moving along, because these things can take, as you all know, a really long time to actually implement. And something that I have been saying a lot is that you will not see a lot of new legislation from our office. And that's because staff is, and again, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but staff is overwhelmed with the amount of items that they are trying to do. And again, we are still a city that's recovering from the pandemic, in that we are not fully staffed up. And in fact, there are some departments in our city that are so understaffed that they're really just trying to do the basic functions. And so I'm very hesitant to give staff a whole bunch of new things to do, because they are already doing so much. And all of these great plans that people in Berkeley have been very excited about, or measures that we've passed, we want to make sure those actually get implemented. And we want to make sure that we're not overwhelming our staff, our city staff, with all of these, with potentially new items. Other projects, there are many projects, and we're actually working on a whole list. So you'll see in terms of short term, long term. Another thing that I'm very focused on, that I was talking about with our city manager today, is we really need to find a location. There has been this question that's posed to our city, which is, where do we go? Our unhoused population has been asking this question. So to me, what is very important is that we identify and make work another place for people to go. It is absolutely heartbreaking. Every day, I look outside of our windows at City Hall and I see a population that is living on the streets with this rain, with the cold. It is just, it's not humane, and we need to get people off the streets and into housing. And I think that regardless of how you think that should happen, or who you're kind of aligned with, I think we can all agree that we want people to be safe and have a place to go. So just to take a step back, another thing I want to mention that I think is important here is that I have found myself saying in a lot of spaces recently, it's not about sides. We have this conversation about homelessness, where people are talking about, oh, well, like folks that are unhoused and they're advocates versus like neighbors that are housed, And to me, that's not the conversation we need to be having. To me, the conversation is, what are we actually doing to move things forward? Because we have a very limited staff to work on these issues, and we need to be realistic with what we're asking for. I'm a very practical person, and I want to make sure that as we're talking about, serving this population, that we are considering, what the resources, the resources that are actually available for us. Let's see. So those are just a couple of projects, but there are many other projects that we're talking about. And in the long term, in terms of like, what is my vision for the city? I want to see us be in a place where we're not worried about, we're not constantly fighting about housing and homelessness, and we're not fighting about cars versus bikes, that we're not divisive in this way. That's actually something that's really important to me in our city. Like, more than just saying the vision of having enough housing, making sure people have enough food, of course, safe streets. Of course, these are things that I want. But to me, one of the things that my big pie in the sky that I really want to see is us be united and work together on these issues, because we know we are in challenging times. We know that there is a presidential administration that is trying to very actively take apart our way of life as Berkeleyans, right? So we need to be united, and that is something that I'm very focused on. And hopefully you can tell that just by the way that I'm talking about these issues. I can go on forever, Lori, and I
No,
can't see
no, it's
anybody.
great. I mean, and you've said a lot of things here that I want to follow up on and you know, and as a personal aside, I'm very excited by the fact that I love the idea of allowing staff to catch up on the work they need to do to deliver the basic services to the city. I think that's one of the most underlooked issues in Berkeley, so I appreciate you mentioning that. Um, uh, so there are a couple things here that you mentioned that I would like to dive into a little bit more that also were issues that the board wanted to ask and some members in our community. One of the key points that you made during your campaign was this, laudable idea of the need for broader community engagement. Many people, especially those with busy schedules, families, and other constraints, often struggle to make it to city council or neighborhood meetings. And as a result, those may not be the most representative voices in the room. So, how do you plan on engaging a broader portion of the community in ensuring that their voices are heard? So maybe those uh, parents with young kids or people who are working in the evenings or have to get up very early. How do you have any ideas about how you might engage people who normally may not attend a neighborhood meeting?
Yeah, I feel like this is like candidate forum point, you know, 1.2 or something. But yeah, I talked about this throughout the campaign as well. I think it's so important that we're actually meeting people where they're at, and that means physically going there. So you will see that I will be actually physically out myself, and my team will be out in the community a lot. Um, I think that it's so important to get a real pulse on what's going on by actually speaking to the people. So one thing that our staff has been working on is a massive list of community organizations, nonprofits, community groups, just like neighborhood, like friend circles, even just everyone. And I was very surprised actually that this list doesn't exist already because in my mind, if I'm like, hey, we've got a fire issue coming up, who's going to be interested in that? I want to be able to search on my list and say, oh, these are the different groups that said they're interested in fire and they want to know more about it. Or, you know, we're looking for interns in our office. We want to make sure that we're getting that out to the community so that we can get someone who's from the community and knows the community well. Who can we send that to? And looking up youth groups and things like that on this list. That is one major thing that we're working on right now. So certainly, if you all have any thoughts about organizations we should be in touch with, we've got a long list already, so we might already have your organization on there, but feel free to send that our way. I think that this is one of the ways that I want to make sure we're connecting with the community. Another thing that I'm not sure if folks know this, but I have a market research background. That was one of the areas that I was really focused on when I was at the School of Business at UC Berkeley. It's marketing and market research. So I'm really interested in finding ways that we can actually like hear from the community virtually to give their feedback digitally. I know that we've got something called Berkeley Considers, which we've used in the past. It's something that we're also looking at, making sure that if there are other ways that we can connect with the community where they don't need to physically show up, that there are those opportunities. Because I think that's something that I have seen over the last few years, but I'm sure longer than that, is that people feel very much that they need to physically come to council to be heard. And you know, that might have been okay. Maybe former council was okay with that. And I'm totally fine with folks coming in person as well. But I do think that there are a lot of barriers, like you've said, to physically being there in person. And we need to give people more opportunities to give feedback. I also am going to have office hours. We've talked a lot about having an open house kind of situation in the mayor's office. I've spoken with people who have worked for the city for many years and have actually never physically been inside the mayor's office. So I want to make our office much more accessible. And we're doing that that. I mean, and Lori, you know this too, but we're trying to do that just generally. My staff like has snacks in our office. We have water. We've been hosting kind of events, and like we did our first yoga this morning from 8:30 a.m. Just 30 minutes of yoga, but on the floor, and helping to make our office more accessible. And I think that these are just some of the ways that I would like to reach out to the community. The League of Women Voters back in the day actually used to have babysitting for parents so that they could attend a meeting. And I'm not saying that the council can promise to do that, but I'm just saying I think that there are ways that we can be creative. And I'm glad you brought up parents, but I also just want to highlight that there are more opportunities for us to create things in different languages, that there are, folks with disabilities that we're not taking into account. There are many different ways that we can make our council, and specifically, I know my office is interested in making us ourselves more accessible.
Great, thank you. And then another thing that you mentioned, which is, I mean, I don't know if there is an answer, but I'll ask it anyway because we're all wondering, looking ahead, as you alluded to, uh, Berkeley, like many other Bay Area cities, is facing potential budget challenges with the end of ARPA, the American Rescue Plan funding, and less certain federal funding under the current administration. And Berkeley will be facing a shortfall, and we're mandated to have a balanced budget. So do you see any particular areas of the budget that you believe is critical to prioritize? And conversely, are there any areas you believe could be scaled back to maintain fiscal health?
That's such a
And
big
I'm
question, Lori.
I know that's why I was like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, there will be some, and of course, we're all operating with very little information now, right? Like a looming
Yeah.
vague budget cut. But
Yeah.
have you had any conversations around that? And I'm not, nobody's looking for a particular answer or
Yeah,
perfect.
no, that's okay. I mean, I should be able to answer this question, right? I'm the mayor of Berkeley. So yeah, I would say that we have had many conversations already about what might be coming, what our situation looks like. My staff is set to have an official meeting with the city manager's office and our finance office and budget just to make sure that we have a good understanding of this from our whole team later this month. So I will probably have a more polished answer later this month. But I mean, I understand like this is a source of anxiety for folks, and folks have a lot of projects that they really care about. And I think that we all know that we are going to have to make very difficult decisions. And at the end of the day, we have to try our best. Even if we're concerned about not having enough money, are there other sources of funding that are available? This is the other reason why I think it's so important, the relationship building with other cities, because it's a way to find out about other grants and sources of funding, and having strong relationships with our state legislators and also our congresswoman. Congresswoman Simon, I've had many conversations with her, and I know she's interested in actually excuse me, she's interested in having a specific individual in her office who's responsible for grants, for specifically helping local jurisdictions apply for grants, which would be really wonderful. I do hope that she implements that. Of course, we're very lucky to have a close relationship with our former mayor, Senator Arreguín, and also Assemblymember Buffy Wicks. So I think we, in that area, are very well positioned to advocate for our city, and that to me is very exciting in terms of opportunity. Although we understand that there's a lot of uncertainty, like you said, around the budget and what's going to happen from the federal level.
And something that you mentioned was is the last board question, and then we'll go on to email questions, and that is because it is a city manager form of government, where for the audience, in case I'm sure probably everybody knows this in the audience, but the city manager handles the operational side of the city while the council and mayor set the policy direction. Um, How is that relationship going? And how do you plan on working collaboratively with City Manager Paul Budenhagen, who'll be here next month, by the way, members.
Oh,
So please attend that forum as well. How do you plan on working collaboratively with him to ensure that yours and the City Council's vision is effectively implemented? And maybe just talk a little bit about your dealings with Paul and how that's been going.
yeah, I'm very glad that you brought that up because it's true. A lot of folks don't realize they're like, oh, so are you actually like telling staff what to do? And like, do you go down to the corp yard and like, make sure that they're servicing things
Yeah.
properly? No, I don't do any of that.
I know.
Um,
Give us the speed bump, Mayor. Yeah. No,
I
none of that. Yeah.
know. I know that this is like kind of the running joke is that people are like, "Oh, like how's it going? My pothole still hasn't been fixed." So, people do actually say that to me. It's kind of funny. I don't know if they're joking or not, but yeah, it's going very well. My relationship with the city manager is wonderful. He is both a kind, thoughtful, collaborative, smart person, and just a wonderful person to work with, just an incredible human being. And people respect him so much. And I will tell you that in this work, something that people really underestimate is the value of relationships. Like I have said this before, and probably even to this group, but I am not a policy wonk. It is not, yes, I have the policy background. Yes, I was involved with League of Women Voters for 13 years. Yes, I went to law school, but I am not a policy wonky person. It does not get me super, super excited to talk about the nitty gritty of things. What's really important to me is like, okay, what's here? What's this idea? Do I understand it? How do we move forward? I'm really very focused on like moving the ball forward. And so, I meet with Paul every single week. His name is Paul, and we meet for about an hour and a half. And we both have kind of lists of things that we want to cover. Of course, like I'm very focused on my issues, right? Housing and homelessness, public safety, infrastructure. So you're going to bet that I'm going to have questions or share information about each one of those areas. And then he usually has things that he updates me on. And something that I'm really looking forward to doing more is taking some of that information that we can share with the community and sharing it with the community because we have a new comms director who just had her first day of like orientation today and is like officially starting tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. Um, and and the other thing I want to say about Paul is that the some and I hope you all give him grace next month because his job is so hard. And I know people tell me like, "Oh, your job is so hard as mayor," and yes, like there are definitely some very hard days or times, but I feel like I have the best job. That I get a chance to interact and hear from people. I get a chance to work on all these issues. I get to work with really smart people like you, Lori, even, and I think that Councilmember Humbert is on the call. I'm super grateful that I get a chance to do this job. And what Paul has to deal with is like the call in the middle of the night to say that someone has been killed or that there was a horrific fire, and uh, these are the things that he has to hear first, and then he's responsible for telling me and to telling the council members and telling our community. And um, you know that is a really hard, intense, emotional job. And I am very grateful for him. So I just have like nothing but good things to say. I could gush about him forever. So I'll let you ask your next question.
Yeah, well, I can gush as well. So yeah. Okay, so now we'll go to some of the submitted questions. Um, And one was from our chair of the Commission on the Status of Women, and she asks, from workplace equity to public safety to education and care, women's rights intersect with many of the biggest issues facing Berkeley today. Can you share your top priorities for advancing policies that support and protect women in the year ahead?
Yeah, well, I would really love to connect. So I'm really glad you asked that question because I know that your commission has actually put out recommendations that I would really love to review and go over with you because I think that, we live in this world where unfortunately we're still dealing with sexism in the workplace, gender violence, and certainly our presidential administration, I think, really exacerbates and encourages a lot of these issues. And I will tell you something else that I think is important to bring into the conversation is intersectionality. Certainly, myself as a woman of color, I feel and unfortunately experience still a lot of sexism and discrimination based not only on my gender but also on my race. And I really appreciate you bringing up that question. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Thank you. And then a few are sort of well, unfortunately, not just current events, but sort of ongoing issues around pedestrian safety. And this question is, I would like to ask Mayor Ishii about her specific plans for decreasing the number of pedestrians injured and killed on a regular basis on the streets of Berkeley. Uh, does she support robust traffic enforcement? And there's follow-up questions, but we'll just stop there with that.
Sure, sure. Well, going back to what I was talking about earlier, our city has so many great plans. I have had conversations with many of you who are advocates for complete streets, who are focused on our Vision Zero work. Yeah, I feel like the news around pedestrian deaths um, and injuries is just it is really it's it's incredibly disturbing, especially when we know that so many of these deaths and injuries are preventable with some of the changes that we have asked for as a council. And a big thing always is how are we making sure we fund these things? You asked also about enforcement, traffic enforcement. And that is something that I am in favor of. I think that the way in which we do it is important to think about. Just bringing up, the issues around like discrimination and traffic stops, for instance. I think that that's important to bring into this conversation. And yeah, I mean, this is something I'm incredibly concerned about as someone who, walks, bikes, drives, takes public transportation. And unfortunately, I myself have been hit by a car on my bicycle. My daughter has actually been hit a couple of times, which is really horrible, only once in Berkeley. Um, but it is definitely something that is on my mind. And when we talk about public safety and infrastructure, that to me, it connects to both of those issues. So something I am very focused on.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, when do you expect to finalize appointments for important commissions like Planning, Zoning Adjustments Board, and the Police Accountability Board?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we decided, great recommendation, that we would keep the commissioners that we currently have now, and then we would have an open call for commissions, all of our commissions. And so that process, my team is working on creating that process right now, and we will send out information. I feel like it's unfair to say give too many details without talking to my commissioners themselves, but we will have more information out to them soon. I think that again, like now that we have our comms director on, I think it's going to be much easier in order to get information out to the public about what's going on here. So I do apologize. I think that this is something that I would have liked to do much earlier. And like I said, it's been tough to even physically get into our office and get all the equipment and things to do the job. So not to say that that's anybody's fault, just to say that sometimes these processes take longer than we expect them to.
Thank you. Um, another question is, oh gosh, uh, uh, what are well, we sort of talked about this with the budget. But I mean, there are real issues that people are concerned about, and that is around plans to resolve the unfunded liabilities with the civic center, marina, the fire stations, etc.
The question is about what
Just
we're
a
doing.
yeah, the plan, it says, what are the future plans to resolve the unfunded liabilities with the, so again, sort of these
That
budgetary
is,
structural issues.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a great question, and it's something that we're working on. It's definitely something that I'm paying a lot of attention to. I did a lot of research around this topic actually for another conversation I'd expected to have. But I will definitely check in with our city manager and see, what work they've been doing so far. I feel like the first month, this last month of January, has really been having so many conversations with our department heads and people who are doing work in our city to give us updates on what's going on, because so much changes even like in the course of a week, that keeping up with everything, it can be very time consuming. So I will definitely check back in. In fact, I will ask my staff who is on the call if you could just take a note about that unfunded liabilities. We'll definitely make sure to check back with that. Thank you. And maybe Paul will have an answer for you by next month.
no, I mean, this is sort of an ongoing question that clearly the city hasn't. It's been a challenge in which to address, right? Like, and it
Mm-hmm.
compounds upon itself. And I don't know if there definitely need to be plans to address it, but it is something that has been a conversation for a long time at this point. So to be continued. Um, I apologize. I'm going to pass over the latest audit report from City Auditor Jenny Wong. If you all haven't read that, it's a very interesting report around leasing issues, which I think are very important. Council will receive that report, and there are steps outlined from the City Auditor on that that department heads respond to. Um, so
If you
that's,
don't mind,
yeah,
yeah, without getting into that issue in particular, one thing I do want to say is that a lot of people feel like, oh, how do you feel about the city auditor reporting about this thing that the city is not doing well, or something? And in my mind, I think that her job is incredibly important.
oh yeah.
Again, talking about accountability and transparency. And I don't see it as like, oh, like this is something that hurts my feelings. This is just something we know we need to be doing better. And I think it's important to be able to take responsibility as a city and say like, oh, actually, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We have some work to do in this area, and to not take it personally. It's not a personal thing.
Oh, no,
I think,
yeah, I
yeah,
agree. I agree with you there.
you,
The reason
yeah.
why the question was around what steps and what's amazing about the work that our city auditor does is that she outlines very clear steps about what are the next steps to do. So, your job is easy in that way, in that, council gets to see where the audit status is. And, generally it's around 5 years to make sure that the audit recommendations are followed through on. But and thankfully, our city departments are usually very responsive to the steps that are outlined. So I'm going to skip over to another question that was asked, and this is an interesting question. Do you believe in eradicating homelessness, and do you believe that it can be done in Berkeley?
Do I believe in eradicating homelessness? I
That homelessness can be
that,
solved.
that homelessness can be eradicated. Um, that is such a good question, and I'm pausing because it reminds me of the work that we did. I bring a lot of things back to League of Women Voters, but we used to say, or I used to say that we are working to make ourselves no longer needed as an organization, because if everyone was automatically registered to vote and voting was mandatory, or there was better civics education in schools, and people were able to advocate for their own causes without having the support then we wouldn't need to exist. And I say all that to say that do I think that we should be working towards the eradication of homelessness? Absolutely. Of course, we should be working to eradicate homelessness. Do I think that it's possible in Berkeley? I think I think having zero folks that are unhoused is probably not possible, only because, just being practical here, right? Only because there will always be other folks who will fall into homelessness. And we should be taking a step back, though, and looking at our systems. And this is something I did talk about throughout the campaign as well, looking at how to prevent people from falling into homelessness in the first place, looking at how we can get folks from living on the street into shelters, into permanent housing, into affordable housing. There are so many different steps to this. It's something that is a really tricky problem, but I would say that it's not something that's impossible, that there are other cities around the world that have worked on this issue. Um, I think the other thing that makes the eradication really challenging is also just like our culture here in America, not to get too theoretical here or start talking about too many different other topics, but and especially in Asian countries, there is such a strong emphasis on caring for your family members, regardless of what is going on with them. And unfortunately, we don't really have that culture here in the United States. It's something that I think makes it very hard to prevent people from falling into homelessness. And um, I also want to share, since this is supposed to be like our sort of casual conversation, um, that I'm someone who has experienced housing insecurity, and it's not something I ever like planned for. It's just a combination of things that happened, and not having the right resources or support to prevent it from happening in the first place. And I'm also someone whose father had frontal temporal dementia, which impacts the frontal temporal lobes of your brain. So a lot of behavioral struggles and compulsive behaviors. And he's someone who would have definitely ended up on the street had my mom not made the very difficult decision to try to support him throughout trying to figure out what was going on with him and making sure that he had access to housing. And I want to share that because this is an issue that I care a lot about, not only as an individual, but also just like as the mayor of this city. I'm someone who really grew up as a caretaker, as someone who had a lot of family responsibilities. And I really see this community, this city of Berkeley, as like my family, my community, and we want to care for all people. So I'm coming at this, in as a very practical person, but also with a lot of my heart too, because it matters so much to me. And it really breaks my heart because this issue, like I said, is still seen as super divisive. And I don't think it needs to be that way. I think that we can get on the same page and work towards the eradication, instead of looking at how people have different sides, different opinions, about this issue.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience here once I make my way through. I guess I can combine. There are two questions here that are somewhat similar, um, and that is, let's see. Well, actually, maybe I'll just do this. Around advancing policy agendas, and since the way Berkeley City Council works, for those of you who don't pay that close attention, in order to pass a policy, it requires 5 votes. So the question is, how do you plan on on collaborating with the city council to push your key priorities, or to push a key priority? And that dovetails into another question, which was around this resetting City Hall. And what does that look like in practice? Like, what are the uh, the concrete steps that you will take to make that reset a reality. I think those probably go a little bit together since it's about council and council relations.
Yeah, I had someone tell me, and I'm sure some of you have heard this before. It's like with council, it's like, oh, do you know how to count to five? Because that's what you need to be able to pass something. Um, and I've already said it earlier today, you're not going to see a lot of legislation out of my office. Um, and that I think is important to say first and foremost. And also, I think that this is an appropriate time to bring up something that happened at council a couple of weeks ago. Um, there was an item that was put forward, and it's been written about in this way, which is interesting to me because it's been written about in this way that's very much like, oh, like how humiliating, embarrassing that like Mayor Ishii put forward this item that didn't get passed. And I actually view it in such a different way. So to give you all a background a little bit, we've got time. You gave me so much time, so I'm gonna just like say whatever's on my mind. So, you know, what was put forward was that I had recommended that Councilmember Luna Parra be on the Agenda and Rules Committee, and for various reasons, some folks decided that they didn't want to see her on that committee, and instead of me knowing that and just burying it and being okay with another item being put forward, I chose to still put it on the agenda and fight for it on the dais. And I think to me, this is part of what we're talking about with the reset at City Hall. Part of it is giving people an opportunity to hold leadership positions and to speak when they're not normally given the opportunity to. She, as the youngest person on our council, as a woman of color, I think that that was an opportunity for her to have more of a voice on council, and that was taken away. And it's really unfortunate because we live in a city that always loves to talk about how we're trying to, change the status quo and give young people opportunities and women of color opportunities. And I'll tell you, because I know this is being recorded and you all are folks who are involved in the city, but I'm going to just tell you right now, like as a woman of color, I will tell you that I absolutely do not feel like the city of Berkeley is a place that has been always supportive of women of color and people of color, because I am one of those people. And I had so many people tell me, you shouldn't run, it's not your time, you're not going to win. What's the point? And and that's the thing is like we need to be willing to give people opportunities to take these leadership positions. Otherwise, how can we really say that we as a city are trying to change the status quo? Are we that we are trying to make the city a better place? Um, to me, giving Councilmember Luna Parra that opportunity was a way in which I am trying to change the way that we do things. Another way is, how we set up our vice mayors. We were kind of just mixing it up and letting folks, some new folks, some long-term folks, become vice mayor because that position, you know, is another opportunity to give people more of a voice. And it's a position which folks are oftentimes very proud to receive. And we shortened the period of time as well, because again, it allows us to share power. And if we're talking about making sure that other people have opportunities for power, this is how we do it. Um, with my staff, when I think about my interns, in every single thing that I am doing, I am taking a look and saying, what power exists here? How can we make sure we're sharing the power? We say we care about diversity, equity, inclusion in the city. Well, what are we actually doing to make that happen, to make these changes? And the problem is, I think, is that this is very threatening for some people. This is very scary for some people to make these kinds of changes, to change the way that we've always done things. And I would hear this a lot in the League of Women Voters too. In the League of Women Voters, same thing. I would oftentimes hear, this is the League way. This is how we've always done things. Why would we do things differently? But in my mind, having me as mayor gives us an opportunity to say, let's shake things up. Let's make things different. let's create this world that we say we want to create, this utopia, as a city, giving other people opportunities to have power. And so to me, it was disappointing, of course, but I think that it is valuable sometimes to have these conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable for people, to have them out in the open, because that is a more honest way to do it. It's more transparent. And I'm really proud that we fought to put that forward, even though it didn't pass. That to me is not the problem. And also what's important to me here is that we're able to move forward together as a council, that there's no hard feelings. And I know that Council Member Luna Parra had conversations with the some of the council members who disagreed on this item, and I'm really proud of that. I love that our council is willing to have those conversations afterwards. It's not easy, we are a group of 9 people who have very, very different backgrounds and beliefs, ages, races, genders, sexuality, all of these different things. And to me, the Berkeley dream is like all of us being able to work together. So this is our opportunity to fix that. And I just really, I think that this actually is a good thing. Like, I see us as trying to work through some changes. I mentioned it earlier: forming, storming, norming, performing. Um, so that is, that's what this is, right? This is part of this storming period. Um, and in terms of like other items, I know that there are so many ways that we are really united as a council. Like, this is one small blip on 4 years of great things that we're going to do together. Because I know that in terms of those issues I talked about, housing, homelessness, public safety, infrastructure, I know you're going to get sick of me saying that out loud, but there are so many different ways that these council members and I are united. I know that we're going to be able to move so much more together. That this is just one thing that we disagreed about, and that's okay.
It is part of that coalition building and collaboration to touching on the steps to in working together. Are you having any retreats, or are you meeting with those council members every week? Like, how does that work in terms of working together on particular issues
Yeah.
outside?
Yeah, and actually, so something else that I want to add to that is, like, the day after that meeting, the 5 of us that were new all went to Sacramento together. And, we had the opportunity to hang out, spend time together. We had dinner together. We went bowling the second night. These are all different ways that we are, building community and getting to know each other and build trust. And I absolutely, like, that was one of the things that I've said throughout the campaign. I was like, I want us to have a retreat. And so what's been challenging is, like, okay, what are the rules around us having a retreat? So we are working to find a day. I know we've asked the city clerk to find time for us to be able to do that. And this is an area that I feel very confident in running retreats. So, that's a lot of the work that I've even done with nonprofits and organizations before, is led, you know, leadership and service retreats, company retreats, group retreats. And I'm very excited about this, an opportunity for us to get together, to talk about our values, to figure out, like, what are our priorities as a council, how do we want to move forward together? And that's something else that, like, at the end of the day, like I keep saying, but, like, what's most important is that we're united and that we're able to move forward together. We're not always going to agree all the time. I don't think that people say that enough. Like, it's okay if we don't agree all the time, because we have different, we have council members with different districts, who feel differently about different issues, and that's okay. What's important is that we're able to keep moving forward together.
Thank you. That's a great way to segue into some audience questions. I just want to quickly state to the person who asked about the ICE, and we talked about that at the beginning of the meeting. And if there's time left, we can wrap back around to address that question. But I want to go now to an audience member who's had their hand up. Catherine Varnow, I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. I'm going to allow you to ask your question. So I will unmute you here. Catherine, you're on. Or
And you,
yes. Hi,
Can-
Catherine.
hi, thank you. All these are very, very important, and I appreciate it. But I am very concerned about downtown Berkeley and the vibrancy of downtown and how it's been really ruined. Um, and I've been standing by hoping that as the buildings get built up, there'll be more vibrancy and a movie theater back and so on. And I feel that there was some mismanagement on the prior administration. Um, and I would definitely like to know more about who we allowed to develop these buildings and so on, but that's a separate question. What can we do? We have a lovely arts district. What can we do to 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 make downtown Berkeley great again?
Thank you, Catherine, for your question.
Praise.
Yes, thank you very much, Catherine. I appreciate that question. And yeah, every time I meet with Councilmember Tragub, who's the District 4 City Council member that covers the downtown area, you know, that's what we talk about. We are always talking about downtown. As I mentioned earlier, trying to identify another space. And by the way, just to give some more context to that, there used to be something which is the Grayson Street Shelter, which was a safe parking site, and also a warehouse where people could set up tents, and they were provided with services and like they could do their laundry and take showers and things like that, have access to bathrooms. That was a location. That's a location that we're basically trying to find another location for. Um, and so that's one of the things that we're going to need to do. I think that one of the things we're hearing a lot from and folks that have businesses down there and just generally stakeholders in the area, they've said that the unhoused population, being in the spaces and especially those who are experiencing really serious mental health issues, that these are kind of challenges that they're experiencing in the area. The other thing is around mental health. So we have both a mobile crisis response team with a Berkeley Police Department presence, and we also have a specialized care unit, SCU. And many folks don't realize that we have multiple ways of reaching out to folks who are having mental health crises, and also they don't realize that the specialized care unit, which does not have a police presence, you can't actually reach them through the dispatch. So if you call 911 and you say, hey, I want a non-police response to a mental health crisis that's happening in downtown, they will say, well, here's the phone number, you'll have to hang up and call them. And so I would say that there are some real serious challenges with the specialized care unit in the way that it's set up. And then unfortunately, to add to that, their person who's coordinating it has actually left, and so her role has been split up, which creates, again, this is another staffing kind of struggle. Another reason why I know that that these issues can be so challenging. So mental health, a place for folks to go. I think that another thing that we've been talking about is like there are so many ideas that have been put forward in other cities like San Francisco, even like things like smaller spaces so that it's more affordable for small businesses. Or Councilmember Hahn had actually put forward an item that would give 1 year free to new businesses. I think there are so many opportunities here that we can take advantage of to revitalize the community, and also just really strong partnerships between the Downtown Berkeley Association, the Chamber of Commerce, Visit Berkeley, our city council member in District 4, and myself. I'm really excited to work on those issues. I think it's so important, and we want a downtown that we can be really proud of, that we can show off, our great arts districts and our great restaurants. And there are things that we can do. they're things that I'm focused on because they're very much connected to those issues that I keep bringing up: housing and homelessness, public safety infrastructure.
Thank you. So if anybody has any question, you can raise your hand and we will call on you. One question that was put into the chat. Oh wow, this is an interesting question. Let's just say how might you and the city manager look to leverage technology, including AI? Uh, you clearly haven't seen our time cards, Kira. Sorry. How might you and the city manager look to leverage technology, including AI, to help manage workloads in the staff constrained environment? Great question. Apologize for my joke, but I will allow the mayor to answer this question around how might you see technology working within the city to help, which is a great idea, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lori is making that joke because we are still doing time cards, like basically paper time cards, and there is not an automatic system for that. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunity here for using technology, and using AI to support the work that our workers are doing. And I say that very carefully because I want us to be really thoughtful about how we're talking about AI, because there's a lot of concerns around people's jobs being replaced by AI. So I want to bring that up in a thoughtful way. Um, and yeah, there are so many opportunities here. And at the same time, imagine that you are super busy every single day, and then you have to learn a new technology and then how to implement it. And I only say that because we should definitely be moving in that direction. And that's something I definitely will bring up to our city manager, because even though we have generally spoken about AI, we haven't talked about, how the city is using or could use AI in its work. And I think that partially that's because just taking the step of implementing a new system can take a long time. And if you're already overstaffed, it's kind of like chicken or the egg, right? It's like, if I reset this system, and then I'm going to be able to get more help, but I need more time to be able to set the system. So it's a little bit challenging. But I really like that suggestion. And I think that that's an important opportunity we have there.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And then do we have other questions in the audience? Let's see. Catherine, is your hand up did I forget to lower your hand from before? Or do you have another question? Catherine, I'll call on you again.
Oh, hello?
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say that I didn't mean my question to be, I guess I'm kind of interested to see that you feel that the homelessness issue is one of the main issues affecting downtown Berkeley and keeping it from changing and getting more vibrant. So I didn't, I don't want to blame the homeless for everything is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no.
And I wish there were other things we could do. But I absolutely agree with you that the top priority is to find a place. And there's got to be a place in Berkeley where people can go and shower. I mean, I'm totally for that in downtown Berkeley or wherever, that we have to find places for people to shower and hang out and go to the bathroom. And it seems like we should have space in West Berkeley to do that. So that's all I'm going to say. And thank you for calling on me again.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
Catherine.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, I didn't mean to make it sound like, I think that our unhoused population is the problem of downtown. There are many barriers still, and some of the other conversations that we've been having is, actually, my campaign staff had done this analysis of the spaces in downtown, and just to kind of show me, like, what are the different storefronts that are empty, why are they empty, is there a project there, is it stalled, if so why, if it's just empty because it's empty, that's good for us to know too, because there's opportunity. And I also want to just throw out there that the Office of Economic Development is another really important partner in that work, because they've actually done some really amazing zoning changes to allow for more excuse me, more nightlife and, different types of businesses that are happening in downtown.
Okay,
Or could happen.
we'll have two more questions. There's another question, a question after, tugging on my heartstrings is, I'd love to hear more about your plans to work with BUSD and the school board to expand availability of after-school care, especially for our elementary schools. Berkeley side just reported that there were over 200 families who were not able to receive after-school care.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking that question. I know that we have a meeting coming up with BUSD folks, and I'm very interested in having that conversation. We also have a committee that specifically is city council members and school board members. And so that is definitely a question that I will ask them to also have a conversation about as well. This is something that I really saw. I actually was a volunteer at Emerson Elementary School's after school program for, I think, maybe 2 years. Like it was quite a long time actually. And I got a chance to see how valuable that after school care is for so many parents. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me that in our country, when we have school start times and end times don't really line up at all with most people's work schedules, and just the amount of kind of hustling and logistics that have to go into just pick up and drop off for our kids. I just think that there's like something fundamentally wrong with our school systems, that we're not both creating more opportunities for after school care, but just generally that our systems aren't set up to be supportive of parents who are working, especially when we live in a time and also physically in a place where so many couples have both of the parents working.
Yeah, as somebody whose kid was just at Emerson's aftercare until a few hours ago, I concur. And I'll just put a little plug in there. I know Mark Humbert's in the audience, the Willard Clubhouse, which is being constructed right now. If you're wondering what's happening in Willard, that is actually going to significantly increase the amount of after school care. It's not going to meet the need that currently exists, but it's a hugely important project that was put forward and passed by City Council under the great stewardship of the Parks Director, Scott Ferris. The art was just approved by City Council, and that's going to go into that clubhouse. And so that should really help out a lot in terms of some of those after-school childcare spots, which the City of Berkeley offers at very low cost. And then
Yeah, I know you've also been someone who's really been a leader in that work. So thank you very much, Lori, also for your work.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, yeah, we have a closing question here, and this is this is a broad one, but in thinking now, this is a very exciting time with you being our mayor. The Berkeley Democratic Club was very proud to support you, and as you look at the years ahead now, which is exciting to think about, what do you want if you're sort of mapping out your legacy? What do you want Berkeley to look like when your term ends, and how might you want to be remembered by the residents of the city? Keeping in mind, this is, the beginning. I know we realize you're at the beginning, but if you have some sort of introspection or thought about, what you might want Berkeley to look like whenever you're, maybe you're going to be a mayor for a really long time, but when you're thinking about your legacy and what you want to be remembered for, and currently as well, what might that look like? And then we'll conclude with that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I appreciate that. And I've been thinking about, it's so funny. I've been making this joke, which has just become actually not a joke at all, that I want to be known as the civic engagement mayor. And when I think about what I want Berkeley to look like, at the end of my time, whenever that is, is I want it to look more organized. And what does that mean? That means that, I want communities to know each other, to know their neighbors. And when there's information from the city, that the city's able to reach people and give that information to them, those resources and support and services. And that when people have questions and they want to know what's going on, that they know who to contact at the city. I know that that sounds like such a, especially I'm sure to you, Lori, who's worked in this office and in city government for such a long time, but we just unfortunately do not do a good job of educating people about how to connect and reach their government, how to get the information, and as the government just generally has not historically done a great job. And I'm not just talking about Berkeley. I don't mean to be, critical of the city of Berkeley, but there are so many ways that we can do a better job of connecting with the community. And I'm really excited to do that. Something that you had brought up that might get asked was around like, how can folks get involved? And so, I'll tell you, just start by talking to your neighbors, make a group chat or an email list, plan a neighborhood potluck. When we have information that we're really trying to get out to the public about, fire safety or public safety or, after school programs, we want to be able to reach the public. And sometimes that's very hard to do just through email. So having organized groups of people throughout the city, that will really enable better, more streamlined communication and also just more involvement. I mean, so much research has shown that being engaged in your community, it creates a much more positive experience for you as an individual, but it's also a huge benefit to us as a community. I really want us to be united. Again, we're not always going to agree on everything, and that's okay. Like, what's important is that we know that we're going to have each other's backs when it comes down to it at the end of the day. So civic engagement club, civic engagement mayor. That's the dream. I think that's the vision.
Well, thank you so much for being here this evening with us. I feel like I've learned a lot, and we have quite a solid audience. And so we appreciate you taking this hour and a half to talk with us, and we look forward with engaging with you in the future. So thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And like I said, it's very important to me that I'm accessible to folks. So, please reach out if folks are interested. I look forward to working with all of you. And thank you all so much for the work that you do throughout the city, because I know that many of you are already incredibly engaged. And I really appreciate that our community really benefits from your work. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.